to forgive me for two things. The first thing is, Terry, that's one of my favorite songs, and you made me cry. So now I'm crying. And then the second thing I'll have to apologize for is I'm not a techno wizard or an amazing person with computers, so this was the best I could do. Sorry. Anyway, my name is Bethany Latimer, and I am doing my presentation today on Mr. Joseph Stone. Joseph was born in Frankfurt, Germany in 1941.
It's the,
where's
the, oh, it's not that.
It's the little black one. Oh. See, I told you. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. He starts out his section of the book by saying that Germans looked at Jews in a sort of a bad way. A Jew was always a Jew in Germany. So he expressed feeling unwelcome in Germany, even as a child. He went to Jewish schools in Frankfurt with his family. He was an only child, so no brothers and sisters, just a mom and a dad. And he said that it was hard growing up as a Jew in Germany, that the other kids were not very nice to him, and that sometimes the other German families weren't always nice to his family. So he always grew up feeling like his family was different, that they were not necessarily part of the German community. And when Hitler rose to power, he was 13, 14 when it happened, and he says that he remembers these night rallies going on with the Nazis and their torches and their loud music and their parades, and he said it was very scary for him and his family that they wouldn't go outside, they wouldn't look out the window, they wouldn't participate or go to these rallies because as a Jew in Germany it was just very scary. He also mentioned that at this time with Hitler taking over that it was difficult having good relationships with their German neighbors, because he mentioned feeling very uncomfortable with the people that lived around them in the apartments and things, because he said that there was always that fear that your neighbor could turn you in, could talk to the SA or the SS about you, and that you just never knew what they were going to do. And so he said he felt even more isolated when that happened, because they just never knew what their neighbors were going to do, and there was a lot of mistrust there. They said even people that they had known for years, their next door neighbors, their German landlords and things like that, the people that they had had relationships with before, all of a sudden didn't want to talk to them, didn't want to have anything to do with them, stopped looking at them even, and he said it was very strange and very scary. Joseph was about 16 years old when the Kristallnacht happened on November 10, 1938. He says that that morning he had no idea what was going on. He went for a walk in the street, and that two SA men came and stopped him. They put him in with a group of about, he said, about 50 other Jewish young men, and marched them through the streets, just like this. And he says that as they were marching through the streets, there were crowds of German people on the streets, even women and children on the sidewalks as these Jewish men were marching by, and that he said that the German people were screaming at them, screaming obscenities, throwing things at them, just saying horrible, horrible things to them as they were going by. And he mentions he doesn't know if the German police made them do this or if this was just a spontaneous thing, but he says that that's very vivid in his mind, and he can still remember being screamed at as he's being marched through the streets by the SA. Fortunately, because he was only 16, he was let go at the end of the day and wasn't taken off to the concentration camps with the rest of the people that day. They let him go, and he says as he walked home, he could see the destruction in the streets from Kristallnacht. A lot of businesses were smashed in and windows broken and things like that. About 3 days after Kristallnacht, the Gestapo came to his house, and his father was arrested, and he was taken to Dachau concentration camp with a bunch of others. Joseph says he was gone for about 4 or 5 weeks, and while he was gone, Joseph was able to go to the American consulate in Frankfurt and was able to work out their visas and travel papers and things, because they definitely knew that they wanted to get out before things got worse. So while he waited for his father to come back from the concentration camp, he worked on their remembers his father coming back about 4 weeks later, ringing the bell and coming in, and he says he can still remember that his father's mustache was shaven off, which was strange to him because his father had always had a mustache growing up. He remembers that his father looked very pale when he came home, that all his head was shaven off, and he just sitting on the wall. Joseph would ask his father later about the camp and about what happened, but his dad refused to talk about it. In Germany, he never talked about it. He didn't want to say anything about what happened to him, about what it was like. So Joseph figured from that it must have been a very traumatic, hard experience for him. But after that, they were very fortunate. They were able to get their papers in order, and they were able to come to America. And that was in 1939, before things got really bad. He says that America was kind of a mixed experience for him and his family. His mother was able to go, his father, and himself. He says it was really hard for his dad to get work for a while. For about 2 years after they immigrated, he was out of work, and it was hard for them to keep their heads above water, but Joseph says he was very lucky. He was able to find work to help support the family, and he eventually was drafted into the U.S. Army and fought for the Americans, and was able to get his American citizenship in 1943. So to this day, he considers himself American. He doesn't consider himself German. Even when he does go back to Germany to visit, he refuses to speak the German language. He speaks English because he's American. I just wanted to end with this quote because I thought it was really, really good. In the book, when he was asked, how do you think the German people reacted to the persecution of the Jews, he says, they did nothing, period. They did nothing. They did nothing to stop it. Guilt by omission is as bad as guilt by commission. You can be just as guilty by not doing something as you are guilty of doing nothing. And yet, you can't say all Germans. I don't know if you have seen the movie Schindler's List. There you have a man who bribed people. He did everything he could to save 12 or 1,300 people. He went through all kinds of little misdeeds in order to save people. If you had more people who stood up like that, things wouldn't have happened. And he was a Nazi in the beginning, but he saw what was wrong and he changed it. That's Joseph's. Thank you.